Good afternoon, everybody. Parshas Chayei Sarah. I really want to focus today on the first verse of Chayei Sarah. The first verse of Chayei Sarah. I saw a beautiful commentary of Rabbi Soloveitchik, which I never had noticed before. I'm sure I saw it before because I always like to read Rabbi Soloveitchik's Chumash, but I hadn't noticed this before. I guess certain things speak to you at different points in your life. So let me first just read this first verse in the Hebrew, and then I'll read the Rashi, then we'll read what Rabbi Soloveitchik said, and then we'll go back and read the Midrash on which the Rashi is based. And then after that, we'll see some more Midrashim, some spectacular Midrashim on this first verse. Very, very powerful verse. All the verses are powerful. This one really spoke to me. So, Vayu Chayei Sarah, the life of Sarah. This whole portion begins about the death of Sarah. And so we start by saying, and this was the life of Sarah, was Mea Shana, V'Yasrim Shana, V'Sheva Shanim, Shnei Chayei Sarah. The life of Sarah was 100 years, 20 years, and 7 years was the life of Sarah. There are three, the Rashi is bothered by the fact initially, and why does it say the life of Sarah twice in this verse? It says this was the life of Sarah, it says it twice. Secondly, why does it break up each of the years? 100 years, 100 years, hold on. 1 second, just give me 1 second. So why was it, Rashi says, why does it break up that fact from 100 years to 20 years to 7 years? So Rashi classically answers this question. Rashi says, Vayu Chayei Sarah Mea Shana V'Yasrim Shana V'Sheva Shanim. First answer is, why does it write years each time? Rashi writes, L'kach Nichtav Shana B'Kol Klal V'Klal. It writes years after each number to tell you Shekol Echad Nidrash La'atzmo. That each one is expounded by itself. Bat Kuf Kebat Ches L'Chet. When she was 100, she was like 20 with respect to sin. That the rabbis in the Talmud to Shabbos 89b tell us that when you are 20 years old, you're up until the fact that you're 20 years old, the heavenly court does not hold you responsible for your sins. And so therefore, when she was like 100, she was like 20. And Rashi, in his commentary to chapter 5, tells us that until the Torah was given, you weren't responsible for your sins until you were 100 years old. So that's even better. So Rashi's saying that even though Sarah was free from sin, even at the age of 100 and even at the age of 20. And then, Mabat Chaf Rochata, so Sharei Ena Bat Onshin, Af Kuf Beloche. So just like she was at 100, like she was at 20, free from sin. Ubat Chaf Kubat Sayin Leofi. And when she was 20 years old, she was like 7 with respect to beauty. There's always been a little bit of a troubling idea. Why is a 7-year-old considered beautiful? So here it possibly means that she was pure. She had this pure appearance, this pure complexion, like a 7-year-old is pure in their form. But it's different approaches to what it means. And then Rashi explains, what does it mean, Kulan, that why does it have to say Chayei Sarah twice? That Rashi says, Kulan Shavin Latova. That all of her years were good. So this Rashi, I remember studying it for the first time when I was maybe in 2nd grade. And it was always a very, very deeply interesting Rashi, but I'm not sure I ever really understood it. And I still don't know that I understand what Rashi is saying. But I want to share with you what Rabbi Soloveitchik said, and then we'll look back at the Midrash, which Rashi is based upon also. Because when I read what Rabbi Soloveitchik said about this, I said, wow, this really speaks to me. So I read what Rabbi Soloveitchik says, Then I'll pause for a moment if people have questions. Rabbi Soloveitchik writes as follows. First, he cites the Bereshit Rabbah. And Bereshit Rabbah is very similar to Rashi's source, so it probably is Rashi's source. It says the word Shana, years, was written after every item to tell us that each term is interpreted individually. At 100, she was like 20 as regards to sin. Just as a 20-year-old girl is considered not to have sin, since she couldn't be punished, so was Sarah at 100 without sin. And at 20, Sarah was as regards beauty, like a girl of 7. The years of life of Sarah, they were all replete with goodness. The Yalkut Shimoni has a different version of this text, Rabbi Soloveitchik notes, which says at 100 she was as beautiful as a girl of 20. At 20 she was as regards sin, as innocent as a child of 7. So they switch it. The other source says that at 100 she was as beautiful as she was at 20, and at 20 she was as innocent of sin as she was of 7. That makes a little bit more sense to me, that the 20-year-old is considered to be like the power, like maybe that's the height of beauty as compared to 100 years old, but who am I to judge? Beauty is in the eye of the beholder, right? Anyway, okay. Certainly not going to rely upon Vogue to tell me who's beautiful or not. No, sirree. We're going to follow the spiritual beauty. Okay, but now is what Rabbi Soloveitchik says. These are the years of the life of Sarah. This is what he writes. Rabbi Soloveitchik, you can just imagine him saying this. She was always a 100-year-old adult, a 20-year-old woman, and a 7-year-old child. Okay, let me repeat that. She was always a 100-year-old adult, a 20-year-old woman, and a 7-year-old child. In the realm of the chemical, there is no way to retain biological youth. People can spend millions of dollars in an industry to retain the fountain of youth. He doesn't say that's me. But you can't do it. You can't retain the biological youth in a middle-aged person, nor can the pattern of the middle age be preserved in old age. However, says Rabbi Soloveitchik, in the realm of the unfolding of the spirit, when it comes to the spirit, it's possible to see youth and ripe old age, or even childhood and youth as simultaneous experiences. I'm going to repeat that sentence again because this is his main point. He says, in the realm of the spirit, it's possible to see youth and ripe old age, or even childhood and youth as simultaneous experiences. The advanced in years quite often display spiritual restlessness and intensity, and the young are sometimes characterized by cautious wisdom and sober judgment. An older person may be wonderfully childlike with a dreamer's naivete and excitement. Ever meet somebody who's maybe in the sunset of their life, but they're still dreaming. They're still dreaming like a teenager trying to change the world. The idealism of youth quite often shines through the eyes of a graybeard. In fact, great people, this is Rabbi Soloveitchik, only, I don't know, and sometimes he says some ideas where after he says it, you said, how come I couldn't think of that? It's so simple. I could have thought of that. He's not quoting like some fancy philosophy, or he's just saying like such a simple idea. But he says, in fact, great people are sometimes great children. They are rich and multi-talented because of their age. They are beautiful because of their honesty and sincerity. So Sarah, this is the point, was concurrently, she was at the same time, concurrently 7, 20, and 100 years old. She was concurrently 7, 20, and 100 years old. She was simultaneously very old and very young. What a powerful idea. That's what this Rashi is telling us. Sarah was at the same time very old and very young, representing the aged, the adult, and the child. I'm going to continue with what he's saying, but what a powerful idea. Let me just say it, that he's saying that the older you are, sometimes you have some characteristics which are beautiful, and also sometimes you're jaded. Younger you are, sometimes you have characteristics which are beautiful, but you're also missing some things. Sarah had all these qualities at the same time. And this is what he writes. Peter Pan was a boy who refused to grow up and assume responsibility. In contrast, Sarah, 20, was mature and developed both intellectually and emotionally. She was energetic, bold, and daring. Yet the adult in Sarah did not destroy the child. In the deep recesses of her personality, no matter how developed, how capable and brilliant, no matter how attractive and ingenious, there always resided an innocent child. The adult might have reached the intellectual peak of greatness or growth, but that didn't stop the secret presence of a child in Sarah. Even as she matured in her wisdom, she retained within her the young girl she had been once upon a time. In times of need and crisis, the young, bold, courageous girl came to the fore and took over. I'll say all the revolutions in human history happened from the young. You have to be young to create, as what Rabbi Soloveitchik now writes, youth represents idealism. The young are committed, unconditionally, arrogantly defying the world. Abraham, like Sarah, was a youth all of his life. He defied the society of which he was a part. He shattered the idols as an act of holy arrogance. He was an iconoclast in a pagan society that worshiped icons. The ability to experience childhood, youth, and old age, this is what Rabbi Soloveitchik writes, is a sign of the covenantal community. The sign of the covenantal community is for a person to be able, I'm going to repeat this, to experience simultaneously childhood, youth, and old age. So now he takes it into the realm of the mitzvos. There are 3 commandments that play a central role in our religious life. What are these 3 commandments? Torah study, prayer, and faith. Torah study, prayer, and faith. The zaken, the older person, is considered wise because he's had more hours to study in the tent, to study Torah. That's why we create zaken with wise, age with wisdom. But as far as Torah study, the experienced mind is considered the ideal. But when we turn to prayer, when we pour out our hearts, who's the one who's the most considered to be the most capable of praying? It's going to be not the elder, but the adult. This is what he writes. The adult, the proud mind, the independent thinker does not know the art of prayer. Talmud Torah requires self-affirmation, self-appreciation. Prayer demands negation, self-negation. To pray means to surrender one's pride and self-confidence, to put aside any awareness of greatness, freedom, and independence. Who's the one who prays the best? Not the oldest, he writes, but prayer is for those who are capable of complete trust in God. Instinctively, the child feels that he is in the embrace of someone who loves him very much. The child embraces their mommy and their daddy, who will protect him and do anything to make his life happy and better. The child represents one who really just emotionally gives himself over to prayer. If you ever prayed with children, you see the purity when they pray, the purity. There's no cynicism, naivete. They're all in their prayer. And that's what Rabbi Soloveitchik is noting. That feeling is the root of the prayer. And there's another very important religious act which only the child in a person can perform, and that is faith. Faith in God requires suspension and judgment, the surrender not only of the body, but of the mind. So who is the one who's so naive, they don't question, who has usually not a cynical bone in their body? That's the child. The faith is purest in the child. So Torah study requires adulthood. sophistication, but prayer and faith requires childhood. And so Rabbi Soloveitchik said, we must be ready for both, capable of assuming the identity either of a child or an adult. The Talmud says the coin issued by Abraham had the images of an old man and woman on one side and the images of a young boy and girl on the other side. Sarah and Abraham merged together. They were old and young at the same time. That's what Rabbi Soloveitchik says. Let me repeat it, just summarize it. And I'll take if anybody has a comment. But Rabbi Soloveitchik takes this Rashi, which I had read so many times, and just made the mistake of just reading it and not really absorbing it. It says, why does it say Sarah was like 100, like 20, and like 7? It says, what it's trying to say is Sarah was both old and young at the same time. She had the spiritual qualities of an older person, the maturation, the life experience, the wisdom, the knowledge, which is essential to being a spiritual giant. But at the same time, she had the spiritual qualities necessary that a child has, which are the recognition that we need to be absorbed by someone, by some entity greater than us, the recognition of handing ourselves over in complete faith to our Creator. These are powerful, powerful ideas which are purest in the child. But unfortunately, as we get older, we get more cautious, and sometimes get more arrogant, and sometimes get more successful, and sometimes go through pain in life or success, these qualities get diminished. And Sarah and Abraham's greatness were that they were able to merge these two aspects of the personality, the childlike and the wisdom at the same time. So I want to pause and I'll stop the recording. If anybody has a comment, I'll be happy to address.